Hello and welcome back to the Jessica Papineau Show. I have a very special guest today, and this is Justin Schenck. And Justin, I just realized I think that you are the first man that I have had on my show
Ever?
ever. I just realized that as I hit record. Yeah,
That's crazy.
I am so excited that it's you. I am
Well,
so
I must say there's a weird thing happening in my world. So obviously I'm a speaker, so I get asked to
yeah,
speak at a lot of things, and like all these things I'm getting asked to speak at is like 75% women, like or more. Right in
yeah.
October, it's 100% women at an event I'm speaking at, and I'm like, what is the universe trying to tell me? Like, what am I? I gotta pay attention to that. But like, I think at the end of the day, like as a speaker, it ends up being like one thing leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And so you get
Yeah.
into one room and then that's what it became. And I think it started at Amberly Lago's event, which is a lot of women there. And it like kind of,
Yeah.
has kind of sprayed off from there.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting that you say that, Justin, because the same in my world, like I've had all women, and then all of a sudden, like you come in, and I've got like these guys that are really cool men, entrepreneurs and speakers and book writers that are reaching out to me in my DMs. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I love it. I love it. So I'm just going to start, Justin. I just want to share a little bit about you because I know you're such a modest guy that I want to make sure that I, kind of share a little bit about what a big deal you are.
Uh, So it's always funny to hear the biography read or whatever it is. And yeah, it's an odd thing.
Yeah, and I feel like the one you sent me doesn't even, do you full justice, but I'm just going to share here. So, Justin Schenck is an entrepreneur, he's a speaker, and he's the host of the top-rated podcast, The Growth Now Movement. He has been named top 8 podcaster to follow by Inc. magazine, featured in Thrive Global, and chosen as an icon of influence in the media space. Justin's podcast has grown to become a podcast that is currently getting played in over 100 countries every single week. And he has gone on to help countless people grow their brands and business with his company, Pod Brand. He is also the host and creator of one of the go-to events for entrepreneurs and forward thinkers, Growth Now Summit Live. So, Justin, welcome and thank you
Yeah.
for
Thank you
being
for
here
having me.
today.
I'm excited about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So you have built one of the top podcasts, and there are a lot of podcasts out there. And you've interviewed some really like powerful, influential people over the years. And I guess, looking back, what would you say got you here?
Oh my gosh. I mean, when you think about it, I started podcasting 10 years ago. And I always like to say that because, I used to tell people I had a podcast and they would go, "What's a podcast?" So to
Mhm.
see the evolution of the medium, because now they roll their eyes and they go, "Oh God, you have one too." Right.
Right.
To see the evolution of the medium has been really, really great because it's been a vehicle that changed my life, and I would say the secret sauce in all of it. And, everybody lean in. It's just be consistent. For the first 7 years of the podcast, I showed up every single Tuesday. I did not miss a week ever. And then fast forward, a whole different story. I decided to take some time off and all that stuff. So now sporadically, I'll just take a month off, whether it's my birthday month or Christmas or whatever. And so yeah, it's just been consistency. Trying to figure it out as I kind of piece things together. There weren't a lot of things 10 years ago to figure out how to podcast. I told you before we hit record, I started on Skype and it had like an eCam recorder third party thing that had to connect to Skype and all
Yeah.
these things. And it's just been an evolution over time. But it's really just show up, be your authentic self. And I think the right people find you. And then
Mm.
from there, it's just been about the ask, right? Reaching out to people saying, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast." And because people are always like, "How do you get these big names?" And, now it's a little bit easier, but I had big names in the first 10 episodes. I had the CEO of 1-800 Got Junk, who's been on,
Yeah.
Undercover Boss, and he's on the Canadian version of Shark Tank. And he was like episode 7. And so I was just big asks right off the bat because I didn't think anything else of it. Right. And so
Right.
just showing up, being consistent over time. And I think that the world rewards consistency.
Yeah. I think that, and so many people, I feel like out there think, "Oh gosh, Justin, he must have just had more opportunities than other people." And I know, like, I hear that about myself too, and people are just like, "Oh yeah, you just, you were just handed this." And it's really interesting because as you kind of talked a little bit about, you did the asks. I think it's like in a way your mindset around the ask. Like, yeah, of course, it's inevitable that you would want to come on my podcast, but also like in the innocent way of like, well, like I didn't realize you were that big of a deal. Like we're all, human beings here. And that kind of leads me, Justin, and I wanted to say this in the beginning when we first met. So we met at a line in January, and you were sitting the VIP night, you were sitting at our table and I knew who you were. However, my husband Ken did not know who you were because he did know. I didn't even tell him who was speaking at the event or whatever. He's just like, "Okay, I'm here for it." It was his first event he's gone to with me. And he sits beside you and you just started talking to him like normal. He's like, "I feel like Justin's like one of the guys like that I grew up with, one of
Yeah.
my good friends that I grew up with." And I think when you walk in with that energy, you just attract everybody and people feel like connected.
Yeah. First of all, shout out to Ken. I mean, I think that you two are two of my favorite people that I've met in quite some time. And,
Oh,
just fate, right? You guys sat next to me or I sat next to you. And I felt weird that night because I didn't realize everybody was so dressed up. I was like in a t-shirt and jeans and everybody's so dressed up at this, this welcome party. And I even said to Brooke, I was like, I don't have clothes to wear to this thing. And she's like,
yeah.
just come anyway. And I was like, all right, and I think for me, like, it's funny, you had mentioned earlier, like, Justin must have had opportunities that other people haven't. And
Yeah.
the truth is, I did, right? Growing up with a mom who battled opioids for 20 years and a dad who was in jail, it gave me an opportunity to be very self aware at a young age. It gave me an opportunity to scrap, to I have to figure this out. The pieces that you put together. And I looked at my parents' life, and although they were great parents, they were very loving parents, and said crazy things to me, like, "Oh, you can do whatever you want," right? And they really believed it. Um, but on the flip side of that, it really kind of set in me like I don't necessarily know what I want in life, but I know what I don't want. And I understand that that takes hard work. It takes consistency. It takes all those things, right? It takes guts to step forward and into things. And it took a long time for me to really figure out what that is. I mean, I tried to be an entrepreneur starting at 24 years old and wasn't a full time entrepreneur until I was 31. And so, like, really trying to piece things together. But it was the opportunity of hardship. It was the opportunity to see choices people made and how they affected their lives. And, it gave me, I believe it gave me a lot of gifts. And I think it's all perspective, right? Like, how are we looking at our lives? How are we looking at the opportunities that are given to us? And how can we make them, fruitful? How can we be proactive instead of reactive to the things that are happening around us? And what a gift that was.
Yeah. And you also and you in high school had a 1.7 GPA.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
bring this up, but I'm bringing this up to say, there are people out there that are like, "Gosh, I mean, I didn't have a great start. How am I going to build something?" And look at what you've built.
Yeah, it's funny. The 1.7, I'll go a little bit deeper in this story. At a
Yeah.
1.7 GPA, my junior year of high school. So my cumulative was not. But that was like the worst time in my life. Like, I was forced to change schools. My dad went to jail. I was living with my aunt and uncle because my mom had not yet moved to the area where I moved to. And I was just like, I don't want to be here. And I sat in the classrooms every day and I'm like, I don't want to be here. And I remember, my guidance counselor in the school, she was amazing. And she went to the principal and said, "You have to pass him. You have to make sure he moves on to the next grade because I'm afraid he won't come back if you don't. It's not his fault. It's not because he isn't picking up the learning, like all these things." And so, shout out to her because what a gift that was in that moment to help move me onto the next phase of life. And when you have a 1.7 GPA in the most heavily weighted year of high school,
Yeah.
college isn't really an option. I didn't really want to go to college, but my mom was like, "Well, why don't you apply at least to one school and see what happens?" And I applied to Temple University because my uncle was on the board. And I thought to myself, well, my uncle's on the board, they'll accept me. They didn't. And so, really trying to then really figure out life after that. I went to community college for a couple of semesters and then ended up going, there's a different path for me. But,
Yeah.
it just a wild time. Nothing was ever handed to me. I tried to just piece it all together and figure it out as I went. And honestly, like
Yeah.
at 41 years old, it looks like I have it together. I'm still trying to piece it together, just at a different level. And I think that, I embrace challenges, I embrace change. And
Yeah.
as things evolve and grow, like I just move forward with it. And it's been a fun journey, and hopefully it'll be a fun journey for the next 60 years.
Yeah. Your perspective is really a powerful one because I think a lot of people, get to a certain place and they're like, I've arrived. Right? Like, I've arrived. I've done the thing. I've done what I set out to do. And the really cool thing about you, and I know you're like a modest guy but you've remained teachable. And it's like you don't have that arrogance or that air about you of I have arrived and I'm here. And I think, even just the way that you started your podcast and even the questions that you asked or that you continue to ask. And we were talking about this before we went live here, but you were talking about how sometimes you forget that people are listening because you're just asking the questions. And one thing that you had mentioned to me was when you started your podcast, you started it for gaining knowledge for you
Yeah.
and gaining knowledge on specifically self-love. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little about that?
Yeah, so 6 months, so it was probably 7 or 8 months before I launched the show, I had the idea to do a podcast.
Yeah.
Back then, things moved a lot slower on the internet, so just to make that fair, it should never take that long to launch a podcast these days. You could probably do it in 24 hours, if we're being honest. But, I had this huge plan, and what ended up happening was I actually had a co-host for the first year of the show, and him and I were up in Cape Cod at my aunt and uncle's house up there, uh, recording the intro and getting it ready and doing all these things. And what the idea originally behind the show was I was going to interview entrepreneurs, pick their brain on how to be a better entrepreneur so I can then build a business and get out of the rat race of corporate. And that was the original plan. And while we were up in Cape Cod, I got a phone call nobody wants to get. And it was my sister calling me, and she said, the doctor says you need to come. And we drove 7.5 hours down to South Jersey. And I walked into the hospital at 1:30 in the morning, and my mom was intubated in the bed, and she ended up ultimately losing her life in that moment. And it was 6 months before I launched the show. And that shifted so many things in my life. And what ended up happening when my mom passed away, I went on a 3-month bender where I was blackout drunk 6 nights a week. And I had two realizations afterwards. So I actually had a coach at the time. She called me one day randomly. We weren't planning to talk, and she called me and she goes, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to go out with some friends." And she said, "No, you're not. You're going to sit and you're going to feel this shit." And I did this whole thing where I wrote a letter to my mom, which was both loving and also hitting points of other things. And then I set it on fire in the sink in my apartment, and doing all these things, and really released. And it was the hardest night of my life because I finally felt all the grief and all the things that were part of it. And when I woke up the next day, I had two realizations. One was my mom didn't die because she was an addict. She died because she didn't love herself. And the second piece was I didn't love myself either. And so every question, not every question, but every single interview I did for the first probably 2 years of the show, I was asking people, how do you love yourself? How do you find hope in a rock bottom moment? Because I felt that that's where I was. And it was really just questions for me of like, how do I figure this stuff out? And I truly think because the authenticity in those conversations, people latched onto it. And
Yeah.
that's why it started to grow. And then the Inc. magazine thing happened because of that growth. And so many great gifts came from all of that. And, for a long time, I felt really weird that I built a platform off of my mom passing away. But so many people have reached out to me and said, because of your message, I decided to change my life or not take my life or any of these things. And I think that that's truly why the universe kind of gifted me this opportunity to be this voice, to have these conversations, to do all these things. But the understanding that the worst moment in my life built the greatest thing, I think that should give hope to so many people that are going through it right now. Like it could be such a catalyst for change. It could be such a catalyst for some sort of impact in the world. Just the key is don't give up. And what a gift that is.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but I don't know. I'm gonna cry. Um, you inspired both Ken and I when you just authentically and in such a real way, we sat at that table that night together and you shared your story of what you just shared right now, about your mom and also how you were trying to navigate the grief And there have been so many years that Ken and I have, like, really held on to our story and our journey of addiction, and, and reason for not sharing really is not wanting to be judged, right?
Mhm.
And, and people have so many misconceptions about the disease and what it means, and, and good people get addicted. And, you share it with such authenticity and just realness. And how were you able to kinda navigate and get over, the, maybe not sharing it? Or did you ever feel like you had to hide that part of your life or of yourself to protect your mom that you loved?
It's a really good question. It wasn't talked about while she was still alive in a public forum.
Mhm.
20 battling an addiction to opioids for 20 years is a crazy thing. Most people don't even make it 20 years with how bad it was. There were times where she was taking 50 to 60 pills a day, which would kill most people, but you build up a tolerance over time. I actually interviewed Kurt Angle on the podcast, and there was a time where he was taking 60 a day. But I think, when she was alive, it was about honoring her and her journey.
Yeah.
And now it's about honoring her journey to make an impact in the world. And from my standpoint, I look at it like when she was still alive, that was her story.
Yeah.
And now that she's passed, it's my story. It's my torch to carry. Now, if she were still alive now and she had recovered, that's still her story. And I hope that she would speak from a place of, teaching and helping people and doing all those
Yeah.
things. And I think for me, like if you're somebody who has struggled with addiction and you've overcome, like what a gift that is to be able to share with other people and say, hey, I did this, so can you. Right. And I think that that's really the power in all of this. It's the power of sharing our story is for somebody to look at you and go, I always would jokingly say when I first started, and I started to do events and speak on stages, I always wanted people to look at me and be like, if that schmuck can do it, I could do it too.
Yeah.
And that was always kind of like the goal that I had in mind
Yeah.
because it's not about me. It's never been about me. I say to people in my mastermind all the time, I don't need you to shout from the rooftops that I have success because I joined Justin's mastermind. All I care about is that moment down the road. If we bump into each other, you buy me a drink or you say, you give me a toast or you do any of these things, right? To like just a quiet nod because it's never been about me. And, me sharing, I mean, there's probably hundreds of podcasts that have launched because I have a podcast. I've had so many people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm starting a podcast because of you. Will you be a guest?" And that's probably happened at least 50 times. So that means there's probably even more, and those people are afraid to ask. But think about the effect of all of these shows and all the people that listen to them and what kind of impact is that? And that's all that matters to me is this idea that it doesn't matter where you come from. What matters are the choices you make today to create a better tomorrow for yourself and for the world. And so that's what I want to inspire people to do to say, hey, look, I may have made mistakes. I may have come from a rough place, but I have this opportunity to be able to move forward. And, I think that I look back at so many different things in my life, and I think it has all set me up to be in this exact place. I remember the first time I ever gave a public talk, I was 14 years old. And that's kind of crazy, right? So I broke both of my hips when I was a kid,
Yeah.
totally different aside. And I ended up getting a wish, not from Make a Wish Foundation, but a different foundation in South Jersey called the Sunshine Foundation.
Yeah.
And they realized they're like, this kid's kind of got some of his stuff together. Maybe he can start speaking for us. And I started to speak for them. And it was terrible, right? Like it wasn't good, but it's just, working that muscle over time. I've gotten better at it and more comfortable with it. And not to say I don't get nervous now before I walk on a stage, but like,
Yeah.
wow, like all these little things that happen, right? And I piece them all together. And I think a lot of people look at those hardships, like, I broke my hip and they play the victim. It's
Yeah.
easy now for me to look back and go, wow, what a gift, right? Like, what a gift that was given to me to say, oh, I'm building a skill at 14 years old that one day would
Yeah.
change my life dramatically, but also change the lives of others. And like, it's just so crazy when you reflect back. By the way, that was the first time in real time that I realized that, wow, me breaking my hips gave me the opportunity to speak and show me that I might be good at it. Right. Like all these little pieces in life that we can piece together. I always say, like, try and find the glimmer in everything that's happening. Right. And sometimes that takes time. It took me a really long time to realize the gift of, my mom's addiction. But I got there and now we can make an impact. And I still talk to my mom. I don't care what you believe. I still talk to her.
Yeah.
And I say all the time, like, we're doing it. Like, we're doing it. I often say we are doing it. And I reflect back and I had a post interview with Gabby Bernstein and she gave me a reading. And she was like, I just want to let you know while you were interviewing me, your mom came through. and she's so proud of you and all these things. And like I just stepped into like the bonus parent role, and she's like she's so happy that you're in this role and all these things. Because for the longest time I was like, I don't want to be a parent. And to hear that was such a great nod, because I did have that guilt around it a little bit, and that really helped relieve some of that guilt to be like, okay, she's proud of what's happening right now.
Yeah. Gosh, so many things in what you just said. But I would say like the biggest thing that that this little nugget that you said, this little through line that I'm seeing of the course of your life and how you got to be here, it was a series of decisions.
Mm.
And, even just the fact that you talked about, broke both of your hips and that's how you became the speaker. That's but do you remember when you were that age, when you had that opportunity to speak? You had a decision to make whether or not you were gonna actually do it. Do you remember what that felt like?
Yeah, I didn't want to. Like,
Yeah.
there was, like it was that, you talk to anybody who isn't a full-time speaker, and the first time they get asked to speak, right? Dr. Cheryl Wood talks about this. I said yes, and immediately in my head was like, "I don't what do you mean, yes? Why would you say yes to that? Like, you don't even you don't like raising your hand in a classroom and asking a question. Like, why did you say yes to doing this?" But, I was so nervous, and I then did it a couple times with the foundation and got a little bit better. And then at 19, I was in direct sales and I did really, really well. So they'd asked me to speak at conferences. And so that expanded that. But like, yeah, like I think now I say yes to things and I just go, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this to you, but before almost every single interview I do, I want to cancel it because I get nervous. And I've been doing this for 10 years, 615 episodes. And so it's like, I always have that hesitation of like, I want to cancel this and I'll just reschedule it when I'm more comfortable.
Did you feel that way this morning?
No, no, no. This is when I'm interviewing people. So like,
Oh, when you're interviewing people.
yeah, yeah. So
Oh,
like, because there's so much involved in that, right? Like you're
yeah,
carrying, like right now you are in a hotter seat than I am. Like I just have to answer your questions, right? Like this is the easy part on my side right now. But when you're interviewing, it's the research, it's the making sure you don't mess up their story compared to somebody else's. And by the way, that has happened. I've done that before. You do enough interviews and all the stories kind of intertwine and they get mixed up in your brain and all these things. But I always just want to be like, okay, should I cancel it? Right. And I've almost done it with some of the biggest names that I've sat down with just because I was so nervous. But it's the yes and then the follow through, even if you're nervous. Like that's where growth happens, right? Growth happens in discomfort. And so yeah, like I remember when I said yes to Amberly Lago to speak at her event, and I got off the call with her, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, that's a big deal. Like that's Amberly freaking Lago, right?
yeah,
Me saying yes and showing up has created so many opportunities, and she's become a dear friend, and she hung out with me in my mastermind in Texas, and just really cool opportunities in discomfort. But you got to show up for yourself first.
yeah. Well, I even remember, when we were at a line and I so resonated with this. I don't even think you had your notes in front of you, or it was like the day before you spoke, and you kinda and we Ken and I had said, like, you prepared, or I don't know what we said, and you said, "I don't really even know what I'm gonna talk about tomorrow."
Yeah.
And so, like, what do you have to say about, getting up on a stage and speaking and performing and being prepared? Like, did you just go up and wing it? What
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So like when I go, I've never given the same talk twice. And
Mhm.
so I love playing off the audience. What are they picking up on? What are they not picking up on? I know my bullet points. Like I know where I need to land the plane every once in a while,
Yeah.
and then I get to go play in the spaces in between. And that's just really about like who's the audience. Did they laugh at that first little quip I had, or did they not? And if they didn't, okay, we're switching the energy of this talk. And so I just play with it while I'm up there. I wasn't always like that, but I will say how that started for me. I I really started speaking a lot at 19 when I was in the direct sales company for a couple years.
Yeah.
And my mentor within the organization, he would have a piece of paper folded in half. So it was like a longer folded in half piece of paper with just bullet points. And he's like, I know these are the things I need to touch on. And that's kind of where I started.
Yeah.
And so I kind of take that same format, with a little bit more fun in between, because that was a lot of instructional talks back then versus inspirational or motivational.
Right.
And so I think I just kind of take that same thing and throw it into now. But what's wild is so there's a guy named Vin Zhang. I don't know if you've ever seen him on your scroll. He's an Asian guy who talks, he gives like public speaking tips, and he's has over 1 million followers now. Vin was episode 17 on my podcast long before anybody knew who he was. And after the interview, I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey man, like, I don't know, do you coach anybody on public speaking?" Like, he was still doing weird stuff. Like, he was still doing magic on stages and stuff like that. It was a
Yeah.
very different person. And he's like, "I don't," but he's like, "How about I coach you?" And so he coached me for free for like 2 months on public speaking. And I kind of learned how to structure keynote speeches and voice inflection and tonal things and like all these things that he had picked up. And I think back now, like, if you want to work one-on-one with him now, he's probably 100 grand. And so, like, talk about, a home run to interview him way before anybody knew who he was, but he already had the gifts. But I take even a lot of what he said, more of like the tonal things that I do, and the pacing, and then, take him to that emotional moment, but bring him right back out of it, because you don't want your audience sobbing. Like, all these little things that I got to learn from him, and that's kind of been my base. And then I've just kind of developed my own style.
When a woman steps into her signature styling experience, it's not just her wardrobe that transforms, it's her entire presence. I'm Jessica Papineau, and I've guided high achieving women to align their style with their vision, helping them show up with unshakable confidence and authenticity. My signature styling experience is a high touch journey designed to elevate every aspect of your life. Through personalized sessions, we'll curate a wardrobe that reflects the powerful woman you're becoming, ensuring you feel empowered in every room you enter. If you're ready to stop playing small and start showing up as the woman the world can't ignore, book a free styling call with me today at csjstyling.com and take the first step towards becoming the woman you're meant to be.
Well, it so resonated with me because I remember I hired a coach specifically for speaking, and, and did an intensive, and they even wrote my speech. And I remember
Wow.
I I I read it out loud. I read it out loud and then and recorded it, and I would put my earbuds in, and like I was trying to memorize it. It's just
Yeah.
And the first time that I spoke, I remember, like, I couldn't even, like, do the slides. It was like chewing gum and walking down the street, and tripping over. And finally, I feel like that was one of the biggest lessons, was realizing that that was not the way it was gonna go. And you can feel the difference when someone does, like, what you do in terms of, like, having those bullet points, but then before going on, like, realizing that, feeling into the audience of what they need, and then kind of playing off that. And I was so happy that I got to go after you when you spoke, and then I went after you, because you shared, and I just want to touch on this and have you speak on because you have like this core kind of keynote that you do, and it's about the people in your life, and how intentional you are about your relationships. Can you share a little bit about that? A little bit about, like, what's the importance of your relationships, and how and the intentionality around relationships for you.
Yeah, I mean, relationships are everything. And I'm writing a book now about all this stuff, and
Yeah.
doing a deep dive on certain things, and just understanding more and more about how important good human connection is, right? Like, as we kind of go in and do research of, when COVID happened and addiction and suicide rates flew through the roof. It's because people became isolated and they didn't feel supported and all these things. And for me, relationships have changed my life. Without the relationships I've been able to build, I wouldn't be where I am now. Like, it wasn't just me and a microphone and then everybody started listening. It was the relationships, the people who wanted to support me, who stepped up for me, who did all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, we all know the quote from Jim Rohn, which is, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." When
Yeah.
I first heard that quote, I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world, because I was like, I was 19 when I heard it for the first time. And I was like, why would 5 millionaires want to hang out with a loser 19-year-old, right? Like, that's dumb. So I just hang out with my loser friends. Like, does that make me a loser? I don't know. And so it was just such an interesting thing. And when I kind of looked back, after I've built some success and started to, become a successful entrepreneur and podcaster and all these things, I was like, well, what does that mean? Who were the five people, as I was able to kind of grow and change? And I realized that the five people would change over time, but it was very much they filled roles in my life. And I'll go over them really quick. So the first person was like my cheerleader, right? That's the person who makes you feel like you're 100 feet tall. That's the person who sees who you can become before you can see who you can become. Just the greatest human that you want to be with them all the time, right? Because they just make you feel amazing. The second person is the bruiser, that person who pokes at your discomfort, who calls you out on your BS, who will even call you out when it's like when you think you're being righteous, right? Like what are you doing? Like I remember a moment with my bruiser. I had known him for years. I knew him before I built a business. And so I would call him when I was like, dude, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent this month. Like, I need to get more clients. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then fast forward probably 8 months to 12 months later, I called him. I'm like, dude, I'm pissed. He's like, what's going on? I was like, I just whiffed on a sales call and the client would have been $20,000 a year. And he goes, he's like, shut up. He's like, 6 months ago, we were having a conversation of like how you're going to pay rent. And now rent's well covered. Like, get your shit together and get on the next sales call and do better. Like that, you can't sit in your own pity, right? So the bruiser is such an important piece in so many aspects. The third person is a softie. So this is the shoulder to cry on, right? That empathetic person who can see you where you're at, but their important key role is they're not going to allow you to stay there. They're going to help pick you up and brush you off and help you move forward. The fourth person is a mentor. I look at a mentor a little bit differently than most people kind of take that word. I think a mentor is somebody who has something innate inside of them that you want more in your life. Right. So for me, my mentor is a guy named Fabio Viviani. And so he's the biggest giver in the world. After I interviewed him on the podcast years ago, he didn't know me other than the hour we spent on Zoom. It might have still been Skype at the time. That's how long ago. And he looked at me and he goes, who do you want to interview? And I was so taken aback that I didn't even have an answer for him. I probably had a huge list of people I wanted to, but I just was like caught off guard. And he goes, how about Andy Frisella? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, I'll make a couple introductions. He wrote 50 individual emails, introduced me to 50 individual people for them to be on my podcast. Everybody from people like Andy Frisella to the Impractical Jokers to you name it. He made these introductions of reality stars, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he didn't want anything in return. And I was like, I want to be more like that. Because he doesn't need anything in return. He owns restaurants all over the world. He doesn't need anything. And so I'm like, how can I be that on such a high level all the time? Right. And so he's my mentor. And then the fifth person is a coach. I believe at any given time, you should be financially invested in your future in order to grow faster. And I don't care if that coach is in business, relationships, spirituality. I've had them all. But I believe at any given time, you should be financially invested because it really kind of hold your feet to the fire to be like, okay, I just paid this person a lot of money. I need to be able to kind of take action and actually get the stuff done. And so those are the five people over time that I realize I've had. In every moment, if it weren't for them, life would have been a lot rockier. My failures would have been longer. My celebrations wouldn't have been as good. And it's just been this incredible group of people that I've been able to take with me, and it expands me. It gives me more opportunity. And also on the flip side, I help expand them, and I play a role in their life. And I think that's the beauty of relationships, especially if you approach with a give first mentality. That's the part most people miss, especially if you feel like you're in a place of lack. I mean, I remember asking Ed Milet, who was worth $500 million at the time, how can I support you? And it was just something I said. And when
Yeah.
I said that to him, there was just dead silence on the other side of the phone. And I was like, hello? He's like, hey, sorry. He goes, nobody ever asks me that. And that ask of, hey, how can I support you was enough for him.
Yeah.
And so how can you support other people? And that's going to build the long-term relationships you can have in your life.
Yeah. I think what's so beautiful about what you just said about Ed Milet is I think we have this idea that when someone is so influential and they are, doing such big things and that we view them as they don't need anything from me. And I find it so interesting because and I'm sure that's why we're so like connected in this way and we just, really get along so well is that I I have that same kind of mindset as does Ken. And what I find interesting when I ask people that question when they're leaders, the reaction, especially if you're on Zoom with them or you're in person with them, their facial expression. Like I
Yeah.
can't even believe you just asked that. And it's interesting that they do have needs And oftentimes I hear that there's almost like a loneliness, like a loneliness at the top of like you're leading people, you're leading the leaders, and but you haven't, merely maybe taken that opportunity to ask somebody else to hold you.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is it's funny, like, my book is making a massive shift as I'm writing it, and that's really the direction we're headed, is the idea that, you can't white knuckle life, and most high performers are white knuckling life, and they feel since they've built everything they've built on their own, quote, unquote, they didn't, but they don't realize it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I've built this all on my own, so if things are breaking down, I can fix all of this on my own. The suicide rate for more men than women, of people who have built massive success, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, is way too high. And it's because we're white knuckling. We're not surrounding ourselves with the right people, or we're not aware that these people are even exist in our lives. And so, yeah, it's lonely at the top. It's tiring at the top. People are falling apart because they feel like that's who they need to be. And that's just not the case. And that's why I love the idea of these 5 people, because you don't have to put your stuff all over everybody. You put your stuff on these 5 people and you realize that there's this support, right? These people see you in such a different light because you've let them in. That makes everything so much easier. Like, it makes everything so much easier. Like, I will tell you, out of my 5, except for one of them right now, I've cried in front of every one of them. And I'm not a crier, right? But it's the people that I let in, and
Yeah.
like, these are the things that we get to do. But like, yeah, it's super lonely at the top. And I will say this too, that question, especially with people who see themselves in that stature, it weeds out the people you don't want in your life. I won't say names. I'll tell you after the recording. I
Yeah.
won't say names, but I said that to them. Let me know how I can support you. And they literally went, "You can't support me."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." And I was already at a place where I loved myself and everything was good. And so it didn't affect me. But if that person said that to me 2 years prior, it would have torn me apart, because it, like, to shut me down, because I wasn't at his level. Right. And
Yeah.
so it was a fascinating thing. And so I just very much just went, "Okay, I'm good. I don't need you in my life." Right. Like, I don't need what you are and who you carry into everything. Because I said that to Ed Milet, who's well beyond you. And he was like, "Whoa, I don't know. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Is there something? Like, what do you have? Like, what do you have? Like, what are your thoughts?"
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting thing in that moment when I experienced that. And it really weighs out the people who are not walking the talk, so to say.
Yeah, and I mean, this all goes back to, discernment. I remember, um, because you're a little bit younger than me, but I remember I did not have and I think it's great. You started a podcast, and I think before people were really, even into them or doing them or whatever. And, I think it's just so beautiful that you've been able to kind of figure these things out with realizing that you don't have to do it on your own. Um, I never knew that. And so I remember like I white knuckled my life until I was probably about 45, and I'm 49. So like it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
But it's like if you can, kind of stay the course and continue to show up in a way where you are giving, you are asking those questions. And, when we ask those questions, sometimes we get hurt. I mean, I know I've been used a million and one times for saying that very same thing. And then going, well, am I ever going to get anything back? But it's just so interesting when you do stay the course and you continue to show up in that way, that eventually you will meet those people, and eventually you'll learn how to have discernment and know, someone that is, like you, that also, wants to give to you. And what I've found, and I don't know if this has been your experience with people giving to you, there's a receiving aspect of that as well.
Yeah, and
And
I think that was a harder muscle for me to
yeah,
strengthen. And here's the thing, right? Like, I ask a question on every single episode. It's a 2-part question, and it's, what is your definition of success, and then what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself. I realized that this is the common thread behind every single person I interviewed, that the things that they did for themselves, or to support themselves, was for them, right? It was meditating, working out, like all the things to make sure that they're healthy and happy and their energy is high. Until you figure that piece out, you're always going to come from a place of lack, because you're pouring from an empty cup. like you're not filling your cup enough in order to pour into other people, but you're still pouring into other people. And so
Mm.
you're just constantly dragging, right? And I realized that like I have a cup, right? And I need to fill that cup first, and what overflows is for everybody else. It took me a really long time to figure that out until I was probably 4 years into the podcast, and somebody asked me, like, what's the common thread behind everybody you interview? And that was the thing. And then I started to put my non-negotiables into my life to make sure that my cup is full, to make sure everything in my world is running smoothly, my family's taken care of, all that stuff. And then the rest is for the rest of the world. And it changed my life. Like once I started doing that, I made more money. Had better relationships. Like things just really changed because most people are trying to support from a place of lack. And it usually goes back to a childhood trauma of you had to be a certain thing to your family in order to make sure that you show up and everybody's happy. But that's a different conversation altogether. But yeah, so it's one of those things that once you figure that piece out, it's game changer.
Yeah. Wow, you answered so many questions that I didn't even ask you. Oh,
Sorry, I got ahead of myself.
no, no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So Justin, I thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on today and pouring into my listeners, and thank you for being the first man on my show.
It's an absolute honor to be on your show. So thank you so much, and thank you for the great questions. And hopefully I said one or two things that made sense, and people can take a
Oh,
note and put it into their life.
oh yeah, no, definitely. Can you share how people can find you?
Yeah,
What's the
so
best way?
Instagram is the place I hang out the most. So my username's at Justin T. Schenck. You can see how to spell my last name in the show notes.
Yeah.
And then if they want to come hang out in person in May, I have an event in the Philadelphia area called Growth Now Summit Live. They can go to growthnowsummit.com and grab their tickets now. I will be announcing speakers shortly, so pretty excited about that. But yeah, like I love in person. There's nothing that beats it. You know, obviously podcasts are cool and we get to connect with each other and you guys get to listen listen in. But what's going to change your life is getting in the room with people who are playing at a different level. And so get out of your comfort zone, show up. And I don't even care if it's my event, somebody's event, go to it. It'll
Yeah.
change your life.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for sharing your story, as I think it just inspires so many people to realize what is possible for them too in this beautiful life that you've created, and sharing everything that you've shared today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I can't wait to see you in person again. Um,
Yeah, January.
yeah, yeah, coming up here real soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope today's episode sparked something in you, a shift, a realization, or even just the permission to step more boldly into the life you're meant to live. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to hit the subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling inspired, I'd love for you to leave a review. It is the best way to help more women just like you discover this show and start their own transformation. Want to dive even deeper? Connect with me. You can find me on Instagram at @thejessicapapano, or head to csjstyling.com to explore how we can work together to align your style, confidence, and the vision you have for your life. Thank you for being here, for showing up and investing in yourself. Until next time, remember, you are worthy, you are powerful, and when everything about you is in alignment with your vision, you become unstoppable.